Hey. Yeah.
I want to say a deep and heartfelt thanks to those of you who made it back from the snack break. So thank you all for being here. I am delighted to be on stage today with, we were having a little chat at lunch before our panel session and realized that we had collectively over 100 years of crisis experience. And we won't tell you how that divided up, but so today with me I have David Hallisey. David is an extremely experienced crisis communicator who had a senior communications job at Petco and has some really great stories. Kimberly Windon, who is a senior vice president at Bridgestone. Thank you, Kimberly. And David Krejci, who leads our media forensics at Finn Partners. I'll tell you, again, part of that little chat that we were having before our session was sort of the good old days of crisis where you could look forward to having, say, a paper mache pig in a park or people dressed as koi fish flopping in a driveway. Those are sort of the analog crises in the middle of a digital revolution, as we've heard today. But before we start with our panel, because this is what I like to refer to as sort of the genetically programmed to siesta time of the day for myself, I want to do Paul Holmes a big favor. I want us, you're all PR folks, I want us all to shout out some words that we would use to create the word cloud for today's sessions. So I'm going to start with H. Engaging, okay. Well, things that you heard. If we're going to make a word cloud about the topics that were discussed today. AI, okay, yeah, right. Okay, what else? What else did we hear today? Innovation. DEI, lots of acronyms. Employees, okay. What else? Purpose. Uncertainty. What else? Chicago, oh, good one. Did anybody talk about hot dogs? Anything else for Paul's word cloud? Cultural fluency, very good. I think what today's discussion to me demonstrates is that we're at this interesting moment of friction between adaptive optimism and constructive pessimism, right? It's a time of extraordinary change, technological change, geopolitical change, and not to go into anything like industrial policy or anything like that, but it is an absolutely extraordinary moment. And this has absolutely resonated in our world as crisis communicators. And it's required us to really adapt to a new ecosystem where everything is changing so rapidly. So I'm gonna sit down and turn to my panel to unpack some of these really interesting things. Hi, guys.
Hello.
How are you?
Good.
David, talk to me a little bit about this evolution that we're going through right now as everything is changing so quickly, from technology to misinformation to no sort of common set of facts or understanding to sort of the busting up of conventional wisdom. How is that affecting the way that you're looking at communications and responding?
Great question. I think the biggest thing is just the shift from reactive to predictive. Certainly there are still situations that companies and agencies and brands find themselves in as it relates to reactive crises. But we're better able today to predict and manage and plan contingencies for a whole host of things. And I think, for anyone that's steeped in crisis, the reality is, especially in this day and age, there's more things than ever for us to worry about and to contingency plan for. And I think the reality is that anybody who's, again, versed in crisis knows that the majority of the really effective crisis campaigns that we run never see the light of day. That said, I think there's one thing in this environment, as crazy as it is, that is probably more polarizing than anything else, and that is either a logo redesign or a brand transformation. And so, as Jessica mentioned, I spent nearly 11 years as head of comms at Petco. And we went through a pretty significant brand transformation pre-pandemic. And it started out with just a really competitive environment. A couple of mega trends that really led the way were premiumization and humanization. But the space had gotten really, really competitive, and it was tough to differentiate. Pet specialty retailers, pure plays like Chewy, you had grocery and mass and Amazon. And so it was incumbent on the business to really find a way to reposition itself and to differentiate. And so we determined that what we wanted to do was really lean into health and wellness. But as this room knows full well, you can't just crank out a press release and change your logo and claim to be a health and wellness company. So we undertook a couple of big initiatives to really build credibility to be able to do just that. And so it started with putting $100 million of business at risk, actually getting rid of it, and getting out of all pet food and treats with artificial ingredients. We took our logo, which was kind of an iconic blue and red ruff and blue moose, like cartoonish style characters. We turned them around so they were back to front and talked about how we were turning our backs on artificials. So I heard it in the last presentation. There was conversation around, it was a galvanizing moment for employees first and foremost, who saw that what we were able to do is differentiate by doing the right thing and putting pets before profits. And so that was a campaign that resonated really strongly, both internally and externally. We won a silver anvil for that campaign, but that was just the start. We still weren't ready to put that stake in the ground, go through the formal brand transformation, announce the health and wellness piece of it. We did a second thing, which was to get rid of human-controlled electronic shock collars, which were really at odds with our positive dog training philosophy and something that had been a point of contention for dog trainers and employees for quite some time. But it was a very high margin category. It was tough to get out of it. There were vendor relationships that were really deep. But we made that decision, and we also knew going in that it was going to be contentious as it relates to the external communications, because while there's a positive reinforcement philosophy that many people got behind, there was also a pretty significant and large group that used that. We didn't think it was appropriate for pet parents to do it who weren't trained. There were folks like Cesar Millan, there's military training. So we knew that there would be a lot of blowback, there would be a lot of social conversation, and that we would have to navigate that. I think the key to all of that was to be able to monitor and engage appropriately, but condition all the internal and external stakeholders to be prepared for some of that blowback that came. But it further, I think, gave us the ability on the heels of that to then have a full brand transformation that was based on doing the right thing, that was based on purpose. And we did win a Sabre Award, so thank you very much.
Congratulations on
for that.
Yeah, you were really on the front lines there, and a lot of what we would consider sort of traditional crisis kind of situations. I want to turn for a second to this moment of transformation and misinformation and the explosion of the digital world. Kimberly, talk to me just a little bit about how you are navigating the complexity of this moment as a communicator with an incredibly complex company.
Yeah, when it comes to misinformation, we all know that it really is an accelerator of chaos. I mean, it throws our worlds upside down. It's something that's happening every day in our lives. And being able to address that and refute it can be extremely challenging. I mean, in companies like what I've worked in, so I've been in legal, oil and gas, chemicals, now in the tire industry. And a lot of times when you're dealing with industry, they want to battle the emotions or the emotions that are out there with your naysayers with facts on our end. And as you know, in the court of public opinion, when you're dealing with facts versus emotion, what's going to win? Emotion wins every single time. And now when you're dealing in a world of misinformation, where you're really in that battle for who makes it to the news feed first, you can't just be in this reactionary mode. You have to think about it from a perspective of how can we change the narrative? How can we reshape perception? And that's a lot of what we're having to do when it comes to anything that we communicate about. So I'll give you an example. We recently had a situation where, you'll find different campaigns that will show up against a company on social media. And the first thing that individuals or companies may want to do is go through the process of saying, okay, let's just go ahead and respond. Well, sometimes responding is not the answer, especially if you don't know where it's all starting from. And for us, we had a situation where we were being attacked. It was tied to union issues in another country. Some of those individuals had media in their back pocket. They were trying to sway the court of public opinion in their direction. And then we dug a little bit further. We found out that it wasn't actually the community members or even our employees that were driving the narrative. There were actually bots that were taking a narrative and really pushing it further. And nobody knew where it started. Nobody knew how we really wanted to address it initially. And my response was, leave it alone. Yes, you may have some individuals that are paying attention, but is it really gaining traction? Are there things out there that we can naturally point to that's already publicly available that can tell the story for us? Do we have individuals in the community that can go ahead and talk about the great things that we're automatically doing? It's part of the work that we're doing, and it's tied to our values as a company, and those are the things that we were leaning heavily on. And sure enough, just as quickly as those stories and the social posts started to escalate, we saw it decrease just as quickly. So there are times when we have to avoid our natural instinct to react, but at the same time, find that rational side of us to figure out what makes the most sense, what is the right approach, and do it in a very conscientious way. And as we're thinking conscientiously about it, then also thinking about what are those various levers that you have the ability to deploy. It doesn't mean that you have to put a company spokesperson right in front of the issue. It means finding what are those options or opportunities that already exist to be able to help you convey the story that's already there.
Yeah, I think it's such a good point, and I was thinking about that when they were doing the demonstration of the AI tool. We're at a very different moment in this evolution of crisis around action, reaction, or no action, and how do you make that determination? And before we had AI tools, of course, it was your 10,000 hours, or in some cases 100,000 hours of your experience that would guide you to make those decisions. So I'm going to turn to you, David Kay. I have two Davids on the panel. It's very confusing. David and I worked on a project this past year, the goal of which was to ensure in a very, very high-profile political situation that our client's reputation and the family's reputation was maintained. And I got to see a little bit of David's alchemy, his media forensics alchemy, in helping to determine which reactions would give the story legs or which reactions might help to tamp the story down. But David, I turn to you to talk a little bit about media forensics and how you are helping our clients to kind of navigate this moment and what some of those insights that you bring with the tools that you've developed.
Sure, thanks. Yes. First of all, I should explain what media forensics means because you probably are unaware. The simplest way to describe it comes from me watching forensics files for hours and hours and hours, and it just occurred to me that why don't we look at communications challenges the way that, forensically we look at a crime scene. You don't just walk up to a crime scene, take a look at it, identify the sentiment and volume of something, and decide who did the crime. You take everything back to the lab, you look deeply at the method and motive of the people that potentially committed the crime, so that you actually have a psychological profile of what happened at the particular crime scene. So the media forensics principles that we bring to FIN or that Finn brings, excuse me, is essentially that in the easiest way. And what does that mean? Well, it means, as I said, starting with the method and the motive of the people that are attacking you, because motives define everything. So a couple examples, I may be working with a client who says, we're getting attacked on the MSN publishing platform right now. There's 5 bloggers that are criticizing us horribly. We think it might be our competitor. We don't know what's up. Forensically speaking, we look in, we go into the source code and determine that there's ad fraud happening, and that the people that are writing these negative stories are simply trying to gain revenue. They're not against the brand, they're just using the brand to generate a little bit of revenue on their brands. So if you had reacted to those 6 articles and their first instinct was, let's go write a bunch of content that refutes what is being said, first of all, that takes time, it takes money. Second of all, that's not really what is happening. Call the publishing platform and say, there are 6 people on this platform that are abusing the ad network that we think you should know about. And sure enough, that leads to a resolution. Or you could be in a situation where you're suddenly getting attacked for reasons you don't understand. Could be a bot farm, like you said. Why is this happening? Well, usually, almost always, it's a cultural division or an ideology that is leading that campaign, because the people that have the money and the technological know-how to do that, they have the money and they have an agenda and they're trying to push that agenda and they understand how to do it. So first and foremost, when I'm working with a client that's saying, should we respond, should we not respond? Or a question I often get is, what's the inflection point, David, when we should respond? Because you're telling me not to respond now because only one person is criticizing and he's got X number of followers and this many of people have engaged. How do you know when to respond? And I try to articulate that it's not about the one person, it's about their motive. And then when I get to method, how are they disseminating their negative information? Do they have a bot network underneath them that's distributing all the negativity? Or is it just a couple people that are angry and they're at home and they're responding? So if you couple method and motive, you have a much better understanding of how to respond, because all responses are not particularly equal. And the last part I try to get to, and I think you've both already said this in a way, about facts. The number of times where the urge or the first instinct is to, well, we will correct that with facts. I'm not saying, of course, that facts aren't integral and that they shouldn't exist somewhere for other people to find them. But to push facts at a group of people that have no interest in believing you to begin with or listening to you is never going to work. In fact, they're going to feel offended that you're pushing facts at them and that you're not listening. And the silliest, perhaps, but hopefully clear, like metaphor that I try to bring to that is, if you're a sports fan, I know sports analogies are a little tough for many, including myself. But you know the time when you're watching a football game and the receiver catches the pass and you don't quite know if he got his toe in. And if that catch happens on the offense's side of the game, everybody on the sideline is cheering, saying that unequivocally was in bounds. If that catch happens on the defensive side, the whole string of players on the sidelines are going like this, saying it was not a completion. And both sides believe that they are true when they're doing that. The confirmation bias of being on a tribal team, watching that happen, they think it was a completed pass or they don't. To me, that's what the new media ecosystem is. The evolution of crisis has moved to a situation where you are literally trying to communicate to the opposing team to get them to change their mind that what they think that they saw was untrue because of confirmation bias that is accelerated by social media. So it is as complicated, I think, as we're all trying to get to, but it's a lot more psychological, I think, than sometimes we give it credit for.
David, if I could move from the sports metaphor to Paul Holmes' metaphor of three-dimensional chess, or my favorite quote, can I say the S word in this room? I say that here. In Training Day, where Denzel Washington says, this crap ain't checkers, it's chess. Talk a little bit about what that means at this evolutionary moment.
That was a setup for a tweet that I've memorized. And I like repeating this tweet because it tries to, it effectively articulates what I try to get to with media forensics. Which was, when you're playing chess and your opponent reaches over and punches you in the face, you're not going to prevail by getting better at chess. So if you are combating a bot network or an ideology of 30% of the country that doesn't believe in what you sell, what you do, what you say, you're not going to get better with a better holding statement. You're not going to get better with better or more facts, because that's just getting better at chess.
Sure.
And I'm certainly not saying, before anyone thinks I'm saying this, I'm not saying punch back at all, because that just throws the table all over in the pieces.
Right, I think that takes us back to act, react, or don't react. And David, I'm going to bring it back to you. So talk a little bit, we've talked a lot today about AI, and it is just this extraordinary, juggernaut of transformation. Can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing in your work around AI?
Sure. I think one of the things as a communicator, particularly on the corporate side, you're a lot of times a gatekeeper, and you've got to manage strategically what stories you're telling to various external audiences, and you need to be really disciplined to do that effectively. That said, it can be really challenging in a corporate environment where you have different business interests, business units, subject matter experts, here I mentioned IT, all of whom want to do press releases, they want to speak at events, and there has to be policies and procedure and protocol to ensure that, especially for a publicly traded company, that's thoughtful, it's been reviewed by the appropriate folks within comms or legal, and that can be unwieldy to manage. I recently did a large-scale assessment of a healthcare company, American healthcare company, and looked at the comms function internally, as well as kind of the agency structure. And one of the things that bubbled up that I hadn't even thought about as it relates to that role of gatekeeper is the fact that today it's even harder than ever simply because of AI. Like, people are emboldened subject matter experts. I don't need to go to corporate communications to help with a slide deck. I can just plug it into ChatGPT. So I think the fact that there are folks, again, that are emboldened and unqualified experts that have a tool that makes it easier for them to do things externally is just another thing for us to worry about. And having gone through this, that showed up in the SWOT as one of the threats, and I think it's something we all need to be really mindful of.
Yeah, not to keep harping on sports metaphors, because I'm actually not somebody who knows much about sports, but these are really unforced errors too, right? I was thinking about, I think it was the local paper here who published that list of the best summer reading books, and only 7 of them, I think 7 of them didn't actually exist because the writer had used AI to create the list, which I thought was the ultimate in unforced errors. But what does that, how does that translate to increased risk as we're trying to navigate in an uncertain environment?
Well, I think there's a few things. Obviously, AI just exacerbates the challenge, but making sure you're speaking with one voice, making sure that, I don't think any of us, whether you're in business or comms, the one thing you don't want as a leader is surprises, right? And it's funny, I remember it was a few years ago, but I was speaking on a social media panel. It was Social Media Week in Los Angeles, and I think the topic was like influencer communications. And it was myself, it was someone from Activision, and someone from Taco Bell. Normal conversation, good panel. We took questions from the audience at the end, and they were on topic until there was one that wasn't. And it was directed at me in my role at Petco, and it was very specific about a specific animal type and an animal care issue. And fortunately, I was up to speed on all the appropriate messaging, and I just took it head on and addressed it. Didn't think too much about it. I remember when we got off stage, the panel was like, "What was that? That was out of left field." And my immediate comment to them was, yeah, that was probably a PETA plant. Well, sure enough, the next morning on Twitter, it was a nothing burger, a gotcha moment. But it was just a reminder that any time we're outside speaking to external audiences on behalf of a company we represent or a company we're employed by, we have to be really, really careful. And I've been able to actually use that as really a teachable moment and a watch out, because I think whether it's a conference like this or anywhere else, large or small, there's always risk associated with it. So I think it's just a good reminder.
Kim, I have a really good friend who works at a management consulting firm, and she and I were talking about how we are changing the way we talk about our brands and our values. And she said, is it really our core value if we don't want to put it on our website anymore? And I wonder how, you're somebody who is so close to your company and the employees. How do you stay true to your brand?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that one, because when you are working with your teammates, I'll give you an example. So our company has gone through a series of organizational changes, leadership changes, and there was a recognition that our employees really did not have a clear understanding of what is it that we were driving towards. Why do we have all of these changes? And one of the initial reaction was to just list out a series of items that were either corporate jargon or just buzzwords that they had seen repeated over and over again. And as a communicator, and that you hear the sentiment of the teammates that are there, you're hearing them say, I don't get it. I don't know what we stand for. I don't know how this is going to help to solve any sort of problem. And you have to take a step back and really tie into, okay, what is the company really about? What is it that we hold dear? What is it that we want our communities and our other stakeholders and employees to go out there and say about us? And so we had to take that step back and say, what's most important to us is the role that we play in terms of mobility, and how do we get people and goods to move from one place to the other. And we have to do that in a responsible manner. We have to help people understand in the most simplistic manner possible, what is our opportunity as a company? And you have to go out and talk about things and do things in a way that really resonates with who you are as a company, that really puts your values on display. You can't go out and just post a slogan out there or make a statement that really is just platitudes. These days, platitudes get you nowhere. Even something as simple as, recognizing different holidays on social media. People will not engage if you just say, hey, it's a great day, or look at how wonderful, or we're here to celebrate all the fathers out there. Okay, what is it that you are really holding dear? Okay, if you have something that you want to say about the fathers of your organization, how have you helped them? What are the different things that you find that are important to them and their families? If you want to talk about a Veterans Day, okay, what are you doing to help veterans that are within your workforce? So it's got to go a level deeper than just skirting on the surface. You have to really talk about what's important to you as a company, as an individual, as a leader, in order to be able to resonate with other individuals. And I'll also tie in the use of AI. So a lot of times right now you have individuals saying, okay, I can just go plug it into this AI tool to be able to help me figure out what is that message going to be. And they'll just go ahead and send it without reviewing it, without analyzing what's out there. What a lot of people misunderstand is that AI is a great tool, but it is just that, it's a tool. It is not the thing that is going to help you connect. In order to be able to connect, you need to be able to have the human approach, the human side of things. You need that empathy and emotion to be able to really identify and connect with what's happening in the outside world. The tools can only spit out what you put into them. So we have to provide that human approach and that relatability. And the same is true when it comes to our employees.
Thank you for that. And I do think that, this evolution of crisis requires us to, I think one of our North Stars in this moment of adaptation is to remember those core values and really be true to that, especially for, a company like yours. Okay, well, David, again, back to AI, and I don't know if we have any Black Mirror fans out in the audience. A couple, okay, good. Charlie Booker, who writes Black Mirror, it's a great show. It's all about the unintended consequences of technology. He was being interviewed pretty recently and said, technology is neither good nor evil. It's really just how you apply it. David Krejci. AI, we've heard everything from evil overlord driving misinformation and dividing us and putting us into our own echo chambers to the smartest intern we've ever had. What do you think?
I think both of those things are true. I think we need to get away from talking about is it evil or is it not evil. I use fire to cook my pasta and it could burn my house down. And we're not making fire illegal and we're not using it without regulation. There are regulations and we take precautions and have fire extinguishers. So for me with AI, when it erupted, when it came to be, I was nothing other than super excited because I could see the potential of what it could do while saying, well, here's another thing that human beings are not prepared for. Technology, we are, not to get cheesy, psychological, but we are not prepared to evolve intellectually as quickly as technology has evolved in front of us for the last 20 years. So it's somewhat entertaining to me to talk about AI when I was telling colleagues what a blog was in 2001, and the internet was in 99, and what Facebook was in 2008. All of these things continually happen, and we're still not prepared, and we don't know what devices are doing to our kids. We don't know what it's doing to us. We don't know. But the genie's out of the bottle, and there is intense value in it, just like there's intense value in social media that also damages the world on a daily basis while connecting people and helping, tragedies. So my overall interpretation is if we could just put a little more good faith into the discussion, because you're right, technology is neither evil nor not evil. Some people are evil. So some people will use AI in nefarious manners, and we should just assume that's going to continue to be the case.
So they're not just misunderstood.
Well, I suppose some of them are. But my point I'm trying to make is that as long as we bring good faith to the use of AI, then we will get good results. But for those people who have no interest and they would rather use it to exploit, going back to my chess tweet that I quoted, it gave that guy's punch a bionic arm.
Yeah. David.
Can I build on the
Yeah, please.
on the human aspect there? I think one of the things, no disrespect to the crisis experts in the room, crisis communications is one of the most basic communications disciplines I think there is. Most crisis plans are really simple. And I think I could probably grab 4 random people from this room. We could take the hairiest crisis we've ever seen. We could spend a half a day and we could build a really, really tight plan. That's not what's gonna make it go sideways. It's legal or outside counsel or the C-suite or egos or blind spots. And so it's kind of that theory and practice. The human aspect of managing crisis is now more important than ever. And so it's the relationships that you build in advance. It's the ability to build trust and respect, which can't necessarily be quantified by AI or any sort of technology. And that's incredibly important. It's going to be even more important over time. And I think it's that it's kind of the augmented intelligence that comes into play, where humans and relationships and trust and respect and how we come together and work together to solve problems is even more important.
Right, and it's the authenticity that's
Exactly.
a part of it. I mean, you have to be truly authentic and credible. And during a time of a crisis, that's where you really have this opportunity to rewrite the script. The person who wins is the one who finds the message or masters the message along the way. It's not about, fighting every single battle or arguing every single point. It's about finding a way to change the perception that is out there and doing that in a way that is very humanistic and it's credible and it's trustworthy and it's something that you find a way to connect with that person or individuals that will really help to move you to the next level.
So the communications and ecosystem has been so drastically transformed. I'm going to slightly probably misquote one of my favorite authors, but Colson Whitehead says, "The truly shocking thing is how quickly we adapt to the unimaginable." And I want to talk about that adaptation. What do you see, David, as some of the greatest adaptations we've made just in the past couple of years as we face a completely different ecosystem for communicating?
Well, clearly, speed and the way we're able to leverage technology is the biggest thing, and I think that will continue to be the case. I don't know, anything you'd build on that?
I would say it's also recognizing who now is essentially a reporter and understanding that the story can come from anywhere and needing to adapt and adjust and quickly find your voice in whatever that situation may be is something that we're having to do on a continuous basis. It's also finding the right individuals within your organizations or companies that can help carry the message in that authentic and credible manner. Not everybody is designed to be a spokesperson, and we should not be placing them in that role. But all too often in the past, that was whoever was the most senior person, that's who we placed there. And we've learned along the way, and especially now when you're dealing with this world of misinformation, you've got to find the person who can come across as the most credible person in the room. And they may not necessarily be the most senior person in the room.
I was just reminded as you were talking of something I heard at last year's Provoke, and it's the one thing that stuck with me the most. And it was, I forget who said it, but she was on the panel and she said, and I was reading an article last week, and when I say I was reading an article, I meant I was watching a TikTok video. Right, so it's really all about, you're exactly right. What is news, what is information, what is reporting? David, did you want to sort of pick up that adaptation question?
Yeah, I mean, you won't be surprised to hear me say this. I would say we're in the process of adapting. I think we're a long ways from being adapted because the thing which we are trying to adapt ourselves to changes every single day. Mm-hmm. So you know how the annoying feature of, I got a new computer, oh shoot, I need a software update, but my old CD-ROM isn't up to snuff with the operating system, so now I got to get a CD-ROM, now I got to get this new software, this hardware, and it's a constant race, and it's never going to end. And I feel personally, having been in the business for 30 years, is that's what we've been doing, or I've been doing, is just evolving as best we can at the particular moment without deciding at any stage that, okay, we've got this. And just, I guess fundamentally what I'm saying is expect tomorrow to be different and to develop a mindset to be in perpetual change that you can adapt to whatever the thing is. When TikTok happens and we have to adapt and we don't know what the next thing is. AI happened, and to me personally, having started my work life, essentially when the internet was coming to bear, this is more significant than the internet to me because it's cognitive, it's not static. So we even have to adapt more quickly. So it's just I guess I'm just trying to encourage myself to remember that if you train yourself to be comfortable with adaptation and change, then you are going to succeed in today's AI or whatever comes next world because you've prepared yourself that things are going to change.
And I would add to that too, that one of the things we're having to adapt to is it's not the world of just a traditional crisis anymore. Now we're playing even more so of a role of being those risk management individuals. I was talking a little earlier today about within communications, you are the ones that typically see the train heading for a collision before anybody else is. And you have to be willing to have that voice and speak up and recognize and flag that this is coming. So if you don't address the risk early on, and if you don't take the necessary initiative at that point, that's when a crisis can, come to be. But we have the ability to change the shape of how things are addressed and not wait for that crisis to suddenly bubble up, because there are always signs, there are trends, there are things that we notice. But sometimes we just wait a little too long in order to shift gears.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting because I remember saying after, maybe it was 6 months into the pandemic, I said, we're all crisis communicators now, right? We're all trying to figure out, this new not normal. And that seems like ancient history right now, which is really amazing. How that's almost just sort of dropped into the background, and we're now navigating all these other transformative forces. It's quite extraordinary. Well, I don't know if the audience has any questions. We have a couple of minutes. There's a question right in front. There you go. Please. Here comes the mic.
Thank you so much. Again, my name is Mary Njoki, founder, CEO, Glasshouse PR, and Pan-African agency based in Kenya. So I work in across 15 markets in Africa. And as I was coming to this session, I wanted to understand more of how we can create crisis communication models for Africa. And because we have weaker structures, number one, and also maybe compromised institutions. And I'll give an example of, which might be very shocking. A few days ago, Tanzania was in election, and for one day, they shut down the internet. And there was a lot of speculation, and then when the internet came back up, there were a lot of bodies, all over. So nobody knows who is telling the truth, so the government is trying to cover that. But then, there's a lot of speculation, a lot of information that, we don't know where it's coming from. So how do you advise governments from that perspective? Also, private sector, whether it's the people who are involved in shutting down the internet or media that is compromised because they'll give one side of the story. So what kind of, this is a global summit, so what kind of models and, frameworks that we can be able to implement in such situations?
Yeah, it's a really important question, and we have not talked very much in the summit about some of the most risky and uncertain things that are going on across the world. We have, I know that the use of, we've seen it during elections in different countries where the internet is essentially turned off in certain areas and is used. It's really weaponized. I think that your question is a really important one. How do we, in a world where there's real serious danger and risk and violence, how do we navigate that kind of deeply complex crisis? I'm not sure we have a chance to, I don't think we have enough time to really answer that, but I do think that as Kim said, we're really moving away from sort of crisis planning to a risk management model, right? And I think that risk management model isn't about any kind of static playbook or long-term planning or old flagging systems we used to have. It's really a much more agile and immediate response, which can be fortified by the technological tools that we have, our expertise. But it's such a great question, and I think we probably need a whole nother day to really address it properly. Well, we're at 0, but I do want to do the lightning round with my panelists, and we've run out of time, but I want to ask them, because we started with a word cloud, if we were on the stage 5 years from now and we were having these conversations all day long here at Provoke, what do you think that the top words that would rise to the top of the word cloud would be, David?
Common sense?
Common sense? Oh, I hope that's right. Kim?
Mine is passion.
Oh, good. Oh, you guys are optimists. Yes, I love it.
Well, it could be passion either way, right?
And then there's me. I really think it will be, here we are again, things are still changing. I think we're still going to be chasing.
Okay, so we end as we begin with adaptive optimism and constructive pessimism. Thank you so much.
Thank you.